Chuck is a vector ecologist with the Maine Health Institute for Research in Scarborough. He's been a resident of Maine's mid-coast since 2015 with his wife, Laura. And when not walking on their small homestead, he could be found hanging with his dog, Charlie. A complete coincidence, you claim. Or hiking the backwoods of Maine. Chuck has been working on vector-borne disease research and surveillance in New England since 1994. After graduating from the University of New Hampshire and graduated from the University of New England with a master's in public health, his work focuses on tick and mosquito interactions, habitat needs, integrated pest management to reduce disease risk. Two other tidbits. In the pandemic, I started a podcast, and Chuck was our guest on episode 47, March 2023. Chuck said favorite science-themed popular culture item. The Blue Oyster Cult single Godzilla from their 1977 album Spectrus has a timely but cautionary tone. History shows again and again that nature won't accept the folly of man. Take it away.
All right. And I got to say, I did not know there was a cowbell involved when I gave that fact to Kate. So, yes. All right. So my topic is going to be about using wildlife serosurveys to detect vector-borne pathogens in Maine, which is an ongoing project for us. Sometimes, as we all know, funding right now in the sciences is fantastic, right? Sometimes this is greatly funded, sometimes not at all. We scrape by. But it's been an ongoing project for us at our lab at MaineHealth Institute for Research since 2009 or so. So why are we doing it? Well, a couple of reasons. One, because the Northeast, and Maine in particular, seems to be an area where we have a lot of vector-borne pathogens that are emerging, becoming prominent on the landscape, showing up for the first time. You know, if you go and talk to people in Connecticut or Rhode Island, apologies to anyone from Connecticut or Rhode Island in the audience, and you ask them about ticks, they've got ticks in every square inch of those states. But in Maine, the vector of Lyme disease, the black-legged tick, which we sometimes refer to as the deer tick, is emerging. It's still moving, and the geography is expanding each year. More and more towns have evidence of this tick showing up, which is vastly different than what was occurring in Maine about 30 years ago. We have other pathogens that are showing up in the landscape that cause diseases in people and pets, like anaplasmosis and babesiosis. And then we have viral things like Eastern equine encephalitis virus. And so this gets into one of the reasons why we use wildlife. It's a surrogate for livestock or people. In particular, deer, but also in Maine, moose, provide us with a surrogate for exposure to tick and mosquito-borne pathogens. And unlike being able to work with people, which can be very problematic from a regulatory standpoint, wildlife is not necessarily. There's a few hurdles to jump through, but by and large, it's a fairly easy population to deal with. So to talk about case studies, I'm going to go into Eastern equine encephalitis virus, which is a viral pathogen. It is one of our most severe, that was on. All right. One of our most severe vector-borne agents. It is a morbidity or sickness rate in people of about 90%. And of the 90% of people that come down with symptoms to EEE, it is a 33% mortality rate. So fairly high in severe. It is occurring in Maine and a lot of the Northeast. And you can see here from a map generated by the Maine Center for Disease Control, 2024 was a year we had a lot of activity for EEE in the state. And for us, we had a lot of activity historically down in southwestern Maine, by the corner of New Hampshire. And then it has sort of gradually just expanded over the years. In some years, we had very little EEE showing up, like last year, probably because of the drought that we had in the state. We have other years, like 2009 and 2024, we had a lot of rain, and that rain produced a lot of activity for Eastern. And of course, you know, we had areas specifically around here, actually central Maine, where we had a lot of new activity showing up, indicating that we're having these areas show up and are becoming kind of permanent foci for disease. So what we do, we go out to tagging stations. And I was warned, there may be a trigger warning because there may be a dead moose in here somewhere, or a couple of dead moose if you guys are like moose. But we end up going out to tagging stations dealing with hunter populations. And why do we do this? Gives us the ability to marshal a large cadre of volunteers in a very short period of time. We can cover a large geographic area and actually get true statewide coverage. And it also, we are dealing with an at-risk and an engaged population of hunters who are exposed. And if they are not exposed, if they have hunting dogs, those dogs are exposed. And like any pet owner, their dogs are their world. And so they are a very willing audience to work with us when we bring samples in. Generally, what we have found is that when we look hard enough, we find that EEE shows up in deer and moose. Deer and moose are being exposed, indicated by these red dots. And now when we see this, this is widespread exposure across all 3 states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Our human and veterinary cases are very small and very targeted, and the numbers are absolutely low. But it does tell us that exposure to this pathogen is going on across the state. It is a highly virulent pathogen, and it affects livestock very readily, and can also affect people. So it does tell us that our messaging needs to be on point, and we need to alert people that this is occurring across the entire region, despite the evidence that we see from veterinary and human clinical science. Current other surveys also help us to examine the presence of new ticks that may be arriving, looking for similar pathogens to the Lone Star tick, which gets a lot of press for the red meat allergy. They have specific viruses that we're looking for now currently, and also allow us to look for other emerging pathogens like Jamestown Canyon virus, Cache Valley virus, and snowshoe hare virus, none of which you've probably heard of because they're very rare. But we are finding that when we look hard enough in our surveyed blood, they are there in the landscape. And I think it's only a matter of time before these diseases do become more prominent. Certainly climate change, which is a dirty word now, is a factor in some of this going on. And I've got about 8 seconds left, and I will call it there. All right.
What's the mortality rate in the in like moose, deer,
Okay.
horses?
Excellent question. So one of the things, this is me getting on a soapbox, which I'm actually on a stage instead of soapbox. So there is an old article from 1923, and I think it's called the Journal of Virology, where a guy who I don't know who he is, but his name was Ellis King, published a small note of an incidence of encephalitis in a moose in Maine. And it was a 2-page article in 1923 published. But it really makes me wonder, because when we're looking at animals being brought into tagging stations, these are all healthy animals. No hunters are going out there and deliberately shooting animals that are sick. But what happens to the moose that we don't see that's 15 feet into a swamp? Or the deer that's not walking across your lawn, but is in the middle of Baxter State Park? We don't know the actual burden of mortality on wildlife, but there are incidents where a sick deer or moose may wander into someone's yard, and they may need to be euthanized. And upon testing, they find out that, yeah, some of these animals actually do have triple E in them. And when West Nile virus showed up back in 2000 or so, that certainly was also a factor for mortality. So I think it is there, and a lot more work needs to be done to dig into it. So
You said the Lone Star tick causes a red meat allergy. What specific virus does it carry, or is it like a venom or something that does that?
yeah. So it's called, I use red meat allergy because that's if you look it up online, that's what's going to pop up on the headlines for CNN or Fox News or whoever. It's actually an allergy to the meat of any hoofed mammal. So if you like camel, sorry. Or, sorry. If you like salmon, you're okay. And what it is, it's actually an allergy. These ticks bite you, and they are triggering an allergy to a carbohydrate called alpha-gal, which occurs in the flesh of hoofed mammals. And upon getting the tick bite, you then say you get a tick bite from one of these Lone Star ticks, and this allergy, the allergic reaction kicks in about 6 hours after the tick bite. So unlike a bee sting, which can show up right away, someone will be having a burger at dinner after getting one of these tick bites, and 6 hours later in the middle of the night, they suddenly wake up with their throat closing. And it's startling because, this is a strange fact, right? Americans love red meat. It's not Lyme disease. Nah, red meat allergy? Oh yeah, that's the scary thing. So it is something that I think seems to be showing up more. And in fact, those of you that want to look, New York Times, I think it was New York Times, had a nice article last year about Martha's Vineyard, where the economy is in absolute turmoil because of the presence of these ticks, which are inundating all of Martha's Vineyard. They've had closures of venues for weddings, vacations, all this stuff. People are canceling, all these visits to the island. But in response, the vegan industry has taken off. So, there's always a bounce back with this. But alpha-gal, the red meat, quote unquote red meat allergy, is a real thing on the landscape. We have a few incidences of it occurring in Maine, but it's not an infectious disease. It's actually an allergy, which is a challenge because allergists and vector ecologists historically don't talk. We're in 2 separate worlds. And so it's caused us to make some bridges or try to make new bridges into new areas.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I've noticed some images and phrasing about mosquitoes, and I'm just curious how that relates to the tick-borne things that
Oh,
you're talking about.
Right. It's because I had 5 minutes.
I know.
So we do tick-borne disease as well as mosquito-borne disease. And so Eastern equine encephalitis is actually a mosquito-borne virus, like West Nile virus. And it really comes down to, ticks are sort of the gross out factor. Everyone's disgusted by ticks, but people are really chill about mosquitoes. Even though some of the viruses that mosquitoes transmit are really serious. But it is sort of a large backbone of our work that tends to get overshadowed by a lot of the tick work that we do. So,
Go ahead.
I have the question about heartworm disease
Yes.
and
Yes.
do you use any statistics from veterinarians and how much has it increased in the past 15 years?
So heartworm is something that occurs naturally throughout. So those of you that don't know, heartworm is not a human pathogen. It's a canine pathogen, parasite actually transmitted by mosquitoes. You have 38 seconds. Okay, but a lot of work has shown that it is prevalent in a lot of our native canid wildlife. So it's in coyotes, it's in foxes. If you have gray wolf populations, it's in gray wolves. So it is around, and we certainly have our mosquitoes native to Maine can carry it. It's a species or a genera of mosquito known as Anopheles, and we have a few species of that are all very efficient at carrying, and it is certainly around. But I think veterinarians are much more on the lookout for it. But it does occur naturally across the entire region of North New England, actually. So it's not something that's really new, but it is more aware.